The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening was an iconic game of its era. It's wacky, unpredictable, and technically impressive. It showed what Nintendo was capable of in handheld gaming, and it showed the world that mobile gaming wasn't going to be inferior to consoles by every metric. Sure, the home console market had things that the Game Boy couldn't keep up with, but none of them could do it on the go. When games like Link's Awakening came on the scene, it showed everyone that you could have story-rich games with a fully explorable world while staying mobile. The compromise on game quality wasn't necessary. We all know how the game affected the industry at the time that it was released. But how does it hold up today? We'll find out today on episode 2 of Bridging the Gap. We're going to be rating Link's Awakening with the 5 pillars of a good game, being difficulty, where we will identify how well balanced the game's difficulty is, graphics, where we look at how well the art style and in-game recognizability of the graphics hold up, conveyance, where we will look at how well we know what to do and where to go in the game, story/progression, where we will see how satisfying it is to progress further in the game, and replayability, where we will see if the game has any lasting value for a second playthrough. Pillar 1. Difficulty. The difficulty was a hard one for me to analyze. On one hand, it's a very straightforward game, with simple mechanics that you will use throughout the whole game. You gain items that you use to solve the puzzles and defeat the enemies, who in and of themselves are big puzzles throughout the whole game. On the other hand, it has several timing perfect things that you have to be able to do to progress through the game. These are things like jumping with Rock's Feather while you dash with the Pegasus Boots. You have to be able to do it to get further, but I still sometimes have trouble with this. The items are all simple to understand, and I appreciate that the game tests your memory throughout as it asks you to constantly use things you learned earlier on to get through later dungeons. Overall, I feel like the difficulty was more balanced than not, but it does have its moments of unfairness. That's why I leave my rating at a 7.
The difficulty struggles a bit for someone who isn't used to this style of gameplay. You need to know not only how to use the items you get to solve puzzles, but you also need to know how to use them to figure out how to dodge the bosses and to be able to deal damage to them. Their patterns can be hard to recognize quickly sometimes. That's why we landed at a 6.
Pillar 2. Graphics. The art style of Link's Awakening is one that can be easily forgotten in its raw form. The black and white Game Boy graphics are something that I almost forget ever existed sometimes. That doesn't mean that the art style is bad, but the original graphics don't do it justice in the remotest. The game does have Super Game Boy support though, which does help a bit, but in my opinion, a 3-color game that doesn't have a different color for different parts of the same objects isn't a proper replacement for full color. This is a bit of a disappointment because so many other Super Game Boy compatible games did wonderful on their colorization, but Link's Awakening fell behind. It rates higher than it probably would if I didn't have the DX version of the game so ingrained in my memory. The DX version takes the graphics that are serviceable, but suffer in monochrome, and makes them stand out in a way that they never did before. Even if I did see the game in black and white for this playthrough, there are certain things that I can't forget, like the blue haze in the mysterious forest, or the bright green grass of the Ukuku Prairie. There are characters that I remember in their fullest color that will always keep the art style as one I love. I have to give it at least a 6.5.
The game struggles with identifying objects because of its black and white color palette. With the Super Game Boy, however, the colors may be limited, but they help with being able to identify background from an entity. The art style is the strongest portion of the graphics, and they still hold up well today. For these reasons, I give it a 7.
Pillar 3. Conveyance. This game struggles a bit when it comes to knowing what to do. There are certain moments that I remember for the first time that I played that still frustrate me today. These include the fact that the owl holds your hand through most of the game. I can forgive that to a degree, since the owl usually only points you in a general direction, and you can forget he exists until the game needs to point you somewhere again. The moments I can't really forgive, though, are things like the Windfish Egg Maze. There is nothing in the entire game that tells you to read one specific book in Mabe Village so that you can hopefully remember the directions long enough to get through the maze and fight the final boss. You also have to start the trading sequence so that you can get the monkeys to build the bridge to the castle so that you can progress there as well. The trading sequence, mind you, that the game never directs you to in any way. I can't forgive something that you come across by accident that is needed to progress through the story. For these reasons, I can only give a 6.
With this being my first playthrough, I found some things were a bit confusing. Confusion means that conveyance is struggling. As I learned on this playthrough, there are things that the game needs for progression that it never tells you to do. These include starting the trade sequence so that you can get the bridge built, and the book with the final boss maze solution. That's why it sits so low at a 6.5.
Pillar 4. Story/progression. The game might fall short in a lot of areas, but the story is not one of them. You start the game after having shipwrecked on a strange island. You are greeted by Marin and her father that live on the island and are told where to go to find your sword. It's there that you meet the owl who is your guide throughout your adventure on Koholint. You progress from dungeon to dungeon with the goal of waking the windfish so that you can get off of Koholint. It is not until you get to the face shrine that the story takes a different turn. You learn that the world you are in is just a dream of the windfish, and that if the windfish awakens, the world you're in will cease to exist. The Owl Guide says that no one knows for sure what happens when the windfish wakes up, but that is the only way to save the island and leave. You end up defeating the nightmares that hold the windfish captive in its dreams and freeing it from its slumber. This is when Link wakes up on the wreckage of his ship and is greeted by the awakened windfish. Just as Link starts to think about the island, a seagull flies overhead. This brings to his memory how Marin said she wanted to be a seagull, so that she could fly far away and see something outside Koholint. The only reason this game doesn't get a perfect score from me is because I wanted to know more about different parts of the island. Why did Richard live in the castle? Who built the face shrines and what were they for? I wanted more of the story. But alas, every good story must have an end. I had to give it the 9.5.
The story was good. Later in the story, you find out the island was just a dream of the windfish. You also find out that if the windfish wakes up, the island and everything on it will disappear. The nightmares know this too, so they try to keep the windfish asleep so they can continue to rule over the island. You continue on your journey to wake up the windfish, so you can end the nightmares and leave the island. When you do wake up on your broken boat in the ocean, the reality and the lucid dream collide as the windfish flies over you. It's a story that would make a good anime plot. The story, in my opinion, is an 8.
Pillar 5. Replayability. The replayability factor in this game is huge. Each time you replay the game, you will remember more and more. But it helps in the sense that you can see past the flaws that it had. Most of the flaws are fixed by playing it a second time and knowing where certain things are. I recommend to anyone who has had the desire to play through the game in each of the 3 versions that the game is available in. Granted, 2 of them are harder to get your hands on, but I think that they're worth the attention. Each time you play through the game, you will find a different way to solve a puzzle that you didn't see before. I can't count the times that I thought, was I supposed to be able to do that? And that's a good thing. A game that can make you feel like you're in control the more that you master the controls is a game that's doing something right. It deserves every bit of the 9 that I give it for replayability.
The best music in the game is the Mysterious Forest, and the game might be worth a second play if for nothing else than the soundtrack. The message is, wow, this looks pretty heavy, you won't be able to lift it with just your bare hands, and oh, what a weird object. There must be some way to tackle this obstacle. Did not age well. And I never want to see either of these again, ever. Because of these, I can't go higher than a 7.
In conclusion, Link's Awakening is a great game with several downfalls, giving it an overall rating of 7.25. It has several things that would become series mainstays, as well as several other things that we would be glad to see go. The game had a legacy that is impossible to deny. We believe that it most definitely deserved the first remake that it got, and the second was also well deserved. The legacy of Link's Awakening is one that the series still owes a lot of its roots to, as it and A Link to the Past built the foundation for games like Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess that would go on to become fan favorites. We think that the treatment this game got was well deserved and are glad to see it live on the way that it is. While the newest version is great to go back and experience the story and world of Koholint, the original still has a certain charm that will never be removed. I just wish it wasn't so hard to get your hands on the hardware that you need to be able to play them in their original forms. This has been Melting Data and Dark Crusader. We'll see you on the next adventure.